Welcome back to Theology for the Unwanted. I'm your host, Dan Tilson, and across from me is our trusty co-host, John Byram. Say what's up.
What's up?
How's it going, man?
You know, it's been a week. It's been a great first week of Lent, but it's been a week.
In a good way?
Well, we have to say that for our interesting fact for the episode.
Here we are. Go ahead, launch into it.
Oh, well, here we go. So I remember several months ago on the podcast, we were talking about this opportunity I had at my big boy job.
Yep.
Well, I'm at these crossroads again. I've been selected, if you will, for another promotion. This time, slightly different. I have an interview coming up for the position next week, but there's been a lot of, let's just say, the opposite of clarity. That there hasn't been a lot of clarity at all in regards to what exactly I'll be doing, what this position entails, let alone the massive restructure we're about to go through that no one knows the final verdict of. So it's a lot of fun. So if you enjoyed hearing about those trials and tribulations back in October, guess what? We're in for another one here, folks.
If this were American Idol in 2003, I'd be like, dial 1-800 and press *1 if you think John should take the job based off of that.
We need to run a poll on social media. Should John take the job? That would, you know what? I'd be afraid of what the results would be.
Should John go to the cottage this summer? If you know, you know.
I don't even play hockey anymore.
Okay. Oh, man. That was a heated rivalry reference. I know at least a quarter of the listeners have watched that. All right.
Way off topic.
So if you're new to Theology for the Unwanted, we are talking to Catholics who have felt pushed away or just have not had a chance to really feel a sense of belonging at their parish. And we are here to help you work through that and to encourage you along the way. But we're also here to talk about theology, especially from a moral theology lens. The world is not black and white anymore, so we're gonna dive deep into the gray, and I think Lent is the perfect time to do that. I guess before we do that, John, I'll give my experience from the week. We had some snow on Monday, I believe.
Barely had snow.
It was enough to justify staying home from work and working remotely, because I don't get to do that very often.
Which in this area is less than a half an inch of snow.
I think that's about what we got, to be honest, because I still went to McDonald's that morning and then went back to my house and then worked remote.
You know, I love that for you.
Yeah. Well, since I'm still pretty new to working off of Microsoft Teams and Zoom from home, I had forgotten to silence all of the electronic devices. And I was giving a presentation to about 100 people on Teams. And I did not know that my brand new Blink doorbell is so loud. I mean, someone came to the door and pushed it. And in the middle of my presentation, it was like this big chime. And then it started speaking. A person has been encountered at the door at model A67. And then it went on for way too many letters and numbers. And at that point, you can see basically all of the squares on the screen laughing at me. I did not recover. In fact, I forgot 3 or 4 of the most critical points that I was about to get to. And I got called into my boss's office the next day to be like, that can't happen again.
That's amazing. I mean, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
But from an outsider's perspective, that's amazing.
You know, COVID was 6 years ago. Yeah, 6 years ago.
Ugh.
I know.
Almost to the month. It was the middle of March that the world shut down.
That's right. And you would think that I would have learned by now how to silence a device and unmute myself at the appropriate time. No. Okay, so on today's episode, I'd already announced that all throughout Lent, we're going to be focusing on the mask that all of us wear throughout the year. Oh yeah, you were making fun of my video.
I was not making fun of your video. Your video was amazing. It was before Ash Wednesday. You recorded it after the Mardi Gras party.
So I recorded it at 1:00 in the morning because on Mardi Gras we were out partying, and once I got back home,
responsibly partying.
We were. I think I had a drink, maybe
a beverage.
Yeah,
I had 2 beverages.
Okay, and that's why you were not recording a video.
Valid.
Anyway, the point of my video is that all of us wear a mask, and I know that our listeners are mostly in the United States, the UK, Ireland. But in Italy, there have been a lot of controversies lately with former nuns and priests coming out and saying, I wore the mask for too long. Now, when you think about previous centuries, the way that they would talk about Lent was not about like this moment to self-discipline yourself into becoming that perfect Catholic. Lent was more about, if you think of like an orange, you got to like get that peel off. What is it? The rind?
The rind.
Yeah, you got to get it off so that you can reveal the fruit that's underneath. And that is much more attuned to how Catholics historically have looked at Lent. But now it's all about like this macho discipline. Before we go there was something that bothered me this week.
Uh-oh.
Yeah. I happened to look at actually a couple different diocesan vocations pages.
Okay.
Vocations are important. We must foster them. We must support our priests and our nuns. And I've especially been thinking about that because of the controversies we're about to go into, where the clergy just didn't feel like the people were there for them. Well, I opened up, for example, the Arlington Diocese vocations page, and the very first sentence goes, the priesthood. The priest is an alter Christus, which is Latin for another Christ.
Ooh, Latin.
Yeah, it sounds authoritative.
It sounds old.
It does sound...
It sounds traditional.
You know how sometimes when you say something in a different language, it makes it seem more authoritative?
Yeah.
Okay, so what's a good one from... Here we go, in Italian. Vietato calpestare I siti abruzzi. You see this all the time when you're walking around in Italy. It sounds romantic. It sounds mysterious, right?
I'm confused.
Stay off the grass.
So, or here's one for you. 2 examples. First one, after the wedding in Italy,
Yeah.
I went with Brandon to Nuremberg, and we went on a tour of the parade grounds from when the Nazi party was there. And the gentleman leading the tour was from England and had a very thick British accent. And I made the comment, oh, this is official. We have someone with a British accent.
That's so true.
And it goes back to think, when you look and you listen to documentaries, for whatever reason, the British accent makes it feel more authoritative.
Yeah. However, working in politics, sometimes I tune into the debates in Parliament, and you're like, they may have a higher vocabulary set.
A very high vocabulary.
But the arguments, they're just as bad as what we're doing in Washington, D.C.
I'll tell you what, have you ever seen the movie Lincoln?
Yes.
The scenes from Congress, and it was like, the slimy slug gentleman from the great state of Tennessee. Like,
yeah.
I need politics to go back to that, where they insult each other but still refer to each other as ladies and gentlemen. I think politics would be must watch if we were to do that.
Well, to the gentleman in Virginia and the Arlington Diocese, I don't fault them for putting this, because this phrase, the priest is an alter Christus, which is Latin for another Christ, this is found in church documents, but you said it sounds old. It is not old. Can you take a stab as to when that phrase entered the church magisterium, meaning the church teaching?
I would have to imagine if it's in Latin, we'd be looking at maybe 19th century at the latest.
No, well, you're not far off. 1908.
So early 20th century. That's fantastic.
My great-grandmother was around. So, and it's not wrong, right? The priest is an alter Christus, another Christ. It makes a very important theological point, but historically, Andrea Grillo, the sacramental theologian, points out that was not connected to ordination. That phrase was connected to baptism. So, John, you've been baptized, right?
Technically multiple times, yes.
No.
Yeah. So it's a funny story. I don't think I've ever told you this. So I was baptized on an aircraft carrier because my dad was Navy.
Yeah.
So when I converted to the Catholic Church at Catholic Campus Ministry, where I converted at, they were fine with the document. When I went to join the Franciscans, they were not okay with it.
Oh.
So I had to get rebaptized, and the friars, having an amazing sense of humor, pulled the water out of the freezer. And that was the coldest baptism I think I've ever experienced or seen.
I hate to break this to you. You weren't baptized a second time.
I know. It was a conditional baptism.
You were hazed.
That was a haze?
That was hazing.
No, the Franciscans would never haze you.
Okay. Okay, so back to the point that I've been reflecting so much on the masks that we all wear. I've been trying to think about this in prayer and how we use the knowledge that we have to kind of prevent questions and to make us feel some sort of safety and some sense of control. Well, it's not wrong to say the priest is an alter Christus, but historically in Catholic theology, so are you, and so am I. And that calling to be another Christ to others, it's deeply connected to our basic calling as Catholics, as Christians, really. And quite frankly, this phrase became popular when people were so enthralled with St. Francis of Assisi. They were like, this man is different. He is another Christ. So, we see this a lot in the church where we will make these statements. It's not wrong just because it's a new statement, but let's not pretend like it's old. I don't know.
I mean, in a sense, you could kind of make the argument that putting something new, like a newer theology, something that's not rooted in the early church or even the Middle Ages when a lot of church doctrine was getting worked out, having something that is so recent, throwing it into Latin is almost, in a sense, putting a mask on what it is.
Remember that TV show, The Voice?
Yeah.
Okay, so I don't know if it's still on. You gave me a look.
I think it is.
Okay.
I think Kelly Clarkson's a new judge for the American version.
It's a global franchise. So,
it's all over.
So 11 or 12 years ago in Italy, there was a nun that appeared, Suor Cristina.
I think I remember that.
Yeah, and she was singing something Alicia Keys.
Okay, first off, it wasn't just something Alicia Keys.
Okay.
It was No One by Alicia Keys.
Thank you. So, of course, when the judges slap the button and they turn around, their jaws dropped. Do you remember this? Play the clip.
Okay.
Yeah, do you see Mother Superior there jumping up and down like she's never envisioned her convent getting this much attention before?
She's over here thinking the vocations are about to skyrocket.
I think they did, to be fair.
Right?
This was national story in Italy. Well, Suor Cristina a few years ago, she decided that she was going to leave the convent, that this was not the right vocation for her. And I think Italians have really been able to grapple with her complex story in a much better way than we tend to. Honestly, when I hear from former priests or when I hear someone that's thinking of leaving the priesthood, there's this fear that the church will just throw you away. And so there's this decision. Do I keep wearing this mask, if you will, or do I leave and try again because I didn't get it right the first time, And this is not to say that, yes, it's a permanent decision when you get ordained, as is marriage. Sometimes we just get it wrong as humans. We make mistakes, And I don't know that Catholic theology has ever wanted someone to be stuck. But Sister Cristina wasn't the only one. There was another priest. He's kind of like the Father Mike Schmitz of Italy, Don Alberto. So in Italy, they don't really go by Padre, even though that's Father. In Italian, they go by Don. And Don Alberto in Milan, he had something like 300,000 followers.
That's it.
It's not exactly a big country, okay?
It's a lot of followers.
They hosted the Olympics, but so...
Is that where it was this year? Couldn't tell.
He came out with this book recently saying how he felt like he had to kind of dress up as Superman. You're wearing that priest collar. And it made me think how does someone know, John? How do we evaluate if you're an expert in your field or not?
Oh gosh, multiple ways. For religious, it's the collar.
Yeah.
The collar is a symbol that we use to justify someone having gone through seminary, someone who is educated in their religion. You could take a look at the religious habit, religious headwear, if it's outside of Catholicism or outside of Christianity in general. There's the religious headwear, there's religious penance, there's symbols that let people know that they are an authority figure or a public face of a religion. Then when you take a look at modern day laity, take a look at a TED Talk.
Right.
One of the first things a speaker wants to do at a TED Talk is validate the reason people are there. They want the people who are listening to know that they are experts or someone that they can listen to in this field. So what they tend to do is they prepare for their talk by cracking open that thesaurus.
Yes.
And they pick the biggest words with the most syllables, because we've been trained that if you're smart, if you are educated, you are able to use these complex words instead of, for lack of better terms, watering it down so your message doesn't get lost.
Don't tell me to keep off the grass. Tell me in Italian.
Tell me in Italian to keep off the grass.
No, I mean, that point goes back to the alter Christus thing from the Diocese of Arlington. Again, it's not that it's wrong. It's just that who cares if it's in Latin? Why did you even have to say alter Christus? The priest is another Christ, right? Why is that less credible? And why do we have to put on these big words and this mask? We want people to believe that we're experts. And you mentioned that the habit or the collar, I guess, is sometimes that thing that protects and upholds an image. So you were a Franciscan for a little bit, or you were a postulant. So you were in formation and discernment. John, did that wearing that habit or wearing that postulant uniform ever keep people from getting to know you?
Absolutely. Because
how so?
So it goes two ways, because you're now an identifiable mark within the church. So when the laity see you and you're wearing the postulant uniform and you have your cross on, because we had to wear a San Damiano crucifix around our neck, and we were all wearing the same polos of our provinces and everything. And the whole purpose was to show the church that vocations are alive. We got to sit with the religious in those religious sections of the churches. We got the same privileges that the religious got behind the scenes in the church. We were treated essentially like religious, just without the vows, without the habit in the beginning. And the laity would come up to us, and instead of trying to get to know us, they automatically assume we fit this like cookie cutter of what a postulant is supposed to be based upon their experience of whether it's postulants with the Franciscans, the Dominicans, the Benedictines, like whatever religious order it is, that's what they automatically project onto you as a person. And they don't get to know you. They get to know the image of you as a postulant.
Do you think others felt that way too?
Absolutely. I mean,
but as lay people, we don't understand that happening.
Correct. Because part of it too is we're trained as lay people to obviously respect the people of the church, right? They have a collar, you treat them a certain way. You can take a look, ask any priest, a priest that goes out in public in the collar versus a priest that goes out in the public in laity clothes, I guess, they get treated differently.
Yeah.
It just happens. Think of it like wearing your favorite sports team's jersey, right? I'm a Denver Broncos fan. If I was to wear my Bo Nix jersey the same week they're playing the Washington Commanders, I'm going to get treated differently by the public for wearing a Broncos jersey because there's meaning behind what I'm wearing.
I think I recall in Don Alberto's book that came out, and by the way, I believe he's left the priesthood. So when the book came out only a couple months ago, it was very clear from the book his intention was to stay a priest. Mm-hmm. The title of his book in English is Your Life is Mine. And he talks a little bit about the difference between the things people were willing to share with him when he was, in that collar versus out of that collar. And he saw how those relationships really changed. So I think one of the premises of his book is I promise to take the mask off. And I saw from Suor Christina, she's now a model. She is striking. She's beautiful. And is not wearing the veil that we're so accustomed to seeing her in. But she did a photo shoot of taking off a mask about 10 days ago. And the caption is Maskere, which is mask. I have worn the smile for years, not because I was happy, but because showing myself fragile would mean giving others power I did not want to grant. And as we've talked about, John, on this podcast before in previous episodes, the laity has not been clued into our responsibility to be there for our priests. And our priests, I think, quite frankly, are not sure how to ask us to be present there for them. Because to show their fragility to us would mean that image of fatherhood, the father's supposed to be perfect, allegedly, crumbles a little bit.
Counterpoint. What was the first thing Pope Francis said when he was presented to the world? He asked the church to pray for him. And he's admitted that taking on the role as vicar of Christ is a tough challenge that he doesn't feel like he's, up for, but God's called him to this role. And he's accepting the challenge that God's presenting him. But he knows in his heart that he's going to struggle with this. So he's asking the public for prayer. And every person in the Catholic world and non-Catholic world was like, wow, the leader of the Catholic Church is asking for help.
For a moment. Not asking for help. He always asked, he would always end his Sunday Angelus with, don't forget to pray for me and have a good lunch. And he said it in like such an informal way that people like, the Holy Father wished me a good pizza.
But I mean, like when he was first introduced, so like that was something that we typically didn't really see.
Okay, but when he got angry that one time, you remember the woman, she grabbed him. She was emotional being in front of the Holy Father, and she grabbed him to bring the Holy Father closer to her. Mm-hmm. Presumably, we'll say for a hug or a kiss. And he slapped her.
He had a very human response.
Okay, but even you explaining that there feels like a press secretary defending their senator. The Holy Father experienced a very human moment.
Well, see, here's the thing is, I would argue that again goes to show that he does need our prayers when he was Pope. And for him to not have that reaction does take grace, right? To have a moment where you're startled by someone coming up to you, like that does take grace, like to not react that way. It was a very human reaction. Not saying it was right, not justifying his reaction of slapping the woman's hand, but it was a very human response. The biggest thing is, at the end of the day, they're still humans. Our priests are still humans. The Pope is still a human.
Oh, I agree 100%. Yeah. When my friend Matt Rederer came, I think nobody's new to this on the show, where I used to do some writing for the Holy See, mm-hmm. and I was able to go see him once a year. And I brought my friend Matt to meet him one time, and Matt got sick right beforehand. Matt, hope you're not listening to this.
We'll find out.
I know, right? But I said to him, hey man, the second you see his smile, you'll realize he's just another dude. I mean, and your fear will literally melt away as he's walking towards you, because you'll see it in his eyes and you'll feel it.
Just another dude sounds like you just like read that out of the Message Bible. For people who don't know, that the Message Bible is a very laid back translation that I believe they refer to Jesus and the 12 apostles as JC and his 12 bros.
Okay, don't use the Message Bible. However, if you want to talk about a translation that has no pretenses,
it's so good.
So don't use it. Don't use it, guys. Anyway, back to the idea of Lent being a time to take off the mask, because religion gives us so much comfort, but that is the wrong attitude to take.
Yeah.
And I think it should draw us to the suffering of others, including those who we assume are perfect, because our clergy, they need us.
They do.
They deserve our support. And I've said before to priests, if you would just let the people know, you'd be shocked at how many people would run to your help.
You think it's very easy to see a priest that whenever you see him, he's always around a congregation of people. He's always around a group of people. What people tend to easily forget is when you're not in church, the priest is alone. He's there with his other priests. He's maybe there with a few church staffers. But at the end of the day, that's all they have. So like their social life, if you will, for lack of better terms, is the Mass.
You did an accidental segue. I don't think that was on purpose. But looking at this through a theological lens, we have to go back to the gospel from the first Sunday in Lent, which is Jesus runs off to the desert, mm-hmm. and he is fasting. And guys, the lesson is not about Jesus was macho through the heat and the sand. That is not the lesson. The lesson is that the very first temptation was, Jesus, you have the power, you have the faith. Why don't you turn those stones into bread? Use your divine power, use the mask of religion, if you will, to prove that you can do something for your own self-sufficiency. And that is something that should touch all of us because none of us are immune to that. None of us are immune from keeping people at arm's length because we want to be perceived as a better Catholic. And so part of Lent, if we go back to the earlier traditions, is again like that orange and you're peeling off the skin. You got to let the fruit underneath be visible. And it takes work. This week, however, John, we take a little bit of a different turn. I think Catholics are surprised, even though this is the gospel every single year, the second week of Lent.
What?
It's the Transfiguration.
The what?
Come on. Can you?
We all know the Transfiguration.
Well, okay,
right?
then recap the story.
So what? Jesus was with Peter, James, and John. They went up high into a mountain, and he was transfigured, right?
Well, what does that mean? What does that look like?
I believe the Bible says his face shone like the sun.
Yeah.
It's very bright.
Yes. It was a miracle, obviously.
Yes. His clothes changed color, and Moses and Elijah appeared, and Peter had his response. He kind of broke into this moment where he was like, oh, this is my moment. And he goes, Lord, it is good that we are here. And if you want, I will make 3 tents here, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah. And then he was speaking.
This Sunday, if you're listening to this gospel, I really hope that you guys catch this moment because Peter is in the middle of giving Jesus a homily and the Holy Spirit interrupts with a booming voice.
He says, all right, Peter, hold my wine glass real quick.
Yeah, no, we have the USCCB translation in front of us. While Peter was still speaking, behold, a bright cloud cast a shadow over them, and then a voice came out. So a lot of saints, this is a difficult one, by the way, because you're like, Peter means well, right? He's trying to establish a sort of liturgy or almost a devotion in this moment by, Jesus, let us build 3 tents for you, right? Look, as Catholics, we have the tabernacle. Okay, we build tents for our Lord in every church and chapel around the world. What's the problem? The problem is that this story is taking place before the suffering that Christ went through.
Mm-hmm.
And Peter is experiencing, for lack of a better term, like a retreat high. And he wants to stay in that retreat high. If you've ever been on a retreat, you know what it's like to kind of have that clarity as you're driving home. And it lasts for a few days, but then you have to go do the hard work. And the Holy Spirit interrupts. Peter, we're not there yet. Calm down.
It's like, all right. We get it. You're here to support them. You're here to walk with them. But pump your brakes, Peter.
Man. John, have you ever been on retreat? Well, I know you've been on retreats. We've been together.
We have.
With any experience of a retreat high?
So there are 2 that really stick out to me. Really 3. 2 were pre-conversion and 1 is post-conversion. Now, I say pre-conversion for a reason because I was blessed enough to be able to go on 2 really big, impactful retreats prior to Easter Vigil, the year I came into the church. One was a silent retreat where...
Those are tough.
They are tough.
Especially for us.
What? We have a podcast? We're talking... Yeah. So having to be quiet and reflecting on, a passage or a story or a theological point for college-age kids was great, and it was different, and it was unique, and it was such an enlightening experience. But for someone who was not in the Catholic Church officially, I kind of felt like I didn't have as positive as an experience.
Oh,
I still had that high at the end of it. It reassured me that I was doing the right thing, that I understood my calling to the Catholic Church, but I felt like I couldn't fully experience what everyone else was experiencing because I wasn't fully Catholic.
Oh, well, how did you, were you angry? What was going on?
Oh, I was pissed. I was mad. And it wasn't at anyone. It wasn't at anyone specifically. I was mad at the situation because it took years for me to get to that point where I understood what God was calling me to do, and that was to convert to the Catholic Church. It took me forever to get to that point. And what I feel like a lot of people don't understand is during a conversion process for a Protestant or even an atheist, because it's kind of the same thing, you already have a preset community.
Right.
And then you're going on this very personal journey of reconversion to join the Catholic Church. And it gets lonely along the way. You lose people. You do. So now you're in classes. You're taking the steps to join the Catholic Church. You're invited to go on a retreat. You're a part of this community, but you're not.
Ooh.
And everyone meant well when they said this. Like in my gut, in my soul, I know they meant well. It didn't help though. People coming up to me are like, I can see you're upset.
Yeah.
Don't worry. Your time is coming and you'll understand. Don't tell me that. Don't tell me that.
I don't actually remember, but that just sounds like something I might say, thinking that it sounds good.
It sounds good. And that's why I knew it was coming from like a good place. Like it wasn't coming from like a place of negativity.
Yeah.
But in that moment where I've been on this very long journey and I can see the finish line just months away, and just realizing I'm watching people that I look up to in a religious standpoint of like, helping me better understand this faith I'm joining, being so emotionally moved by their prayer, by adoration, by what they just heard and reflected and prayed on, and watching them break down emotionally into tears. I wanted that. Like, that's like, to me, that was a peer of mine having a relationship with God in that moment, whether they came to a revelation, whether they finally understood something, or maybe that moment of reflection in silent adoration helped them better understand God's want for their life. I'm over here wanting that also. And they get the clarity of receiving the Eucharist at the end of all of this. And I get to sit back in the pew. And to me, and again, it was knowing my time was coming to be brought into the church, but I so desperately wanted to be a part of the church at that moment because I wanted to better understand. What I failed to understand, though, is I was exactly where God wanted me to be. That even in Lent, we have to suffer. We have to realize that life is a journey and it's not always going to go the way we want. What I got away from that silent retreat is I waited all these years to get this far. And now here I am months away from being brought into the church. Rejoice at my steps along the way. Be happy where you're at.
Oh, I'm glad you shared that. I don't think I really knew that. And it's just one of those things people say because they're trying to be friendly, and supportive.
Oh, I know. I don't hold it against you.
Well, thanks. I would generally say to Catholics, and even those who are not Catholic but going on a retreat, you should not feel pressured to have some sort of retreat high like
Correct.
Peter was, right? Because you can see the Holy Spirit's going to be like, is going to interrupt mid-sentence.
Always does.
Yes.
Always does.
And seeing people around you have this like euphoria. I was never like a charismatic Catholic. I always loved like the more traditional Latin Mass, but seeing people with like their hands in the air and you're like, are they going to float to the ceiling? What's going on? Should we hold them down so that we don't lose them?
Actually, the new 21st century pews have tethers where you're supposed to strap it to your ankle so you don't float away. No? Is that not it?
The 21st century pews have QR codes so you can donate.
QR codes. Segue real quick. I remember being brought into the church. The hypocrisy that was using a digital Bible in the pew, now completely acceptable.
Huh.
And it wasn't that long ago. It was like, 12 years ago that I came into the church?
We have a difficulty minding our own business in the pews. And kind of going back to this here, the Eucharist is a communal experience. It is not supposed to be some individual piety.
Yeah.
However, just because the person next to you has reached like a moment of clarity, of euphoria, you should not feel pressured to feel that yourself.
Exactly.
Because that often lends itself to a mistake, right?
Correct.
I guess, I don't like liberation theology, which is kind of, in America, we would just call it like progressive. That's not really what it is, but like, I don't like liberation theology. I don't like neo-scholasticism, which is what you can find in this area.
Mhm.
Okay. I belong to the camp of Catholic theology known as critical realism, which means theology is reality. If it is real, then it is true. If it is true, then it is Catholic. Okay. That God is the sum of all reality. If we feel pressure to assign values to things when we have not actually worked them out, then we are probably going to make a mistake.
Yeah.
This is kind of the idea of discernment can sometimes be long, and sometimes it is good to realize like, oh, I'm not there yet, right? As long as we're not holding ourselves back intentionally, it's okay to say I'm not there yet. But with critical realism, we you don't want to look at the person next to you and say I need to be there, because God is capable of speaking to you exactly where you are, and you do not need to feel like you have to put on this mask. For me, I was in retreats thinking, okay, I suffer from same-sex attraction. If I can leave this retreat with a little bit more energy to just kind of lock it down and, to be totally chaste and power through it, it became accidentally about my will and my power, kind of like, the temptation we talked about with Jesus and turning the stones into bread, right? It became as good intentioned as I wanted it to be. It became about my power. And that is not a true Eucharistic experience. So I guess the question, John, is we have to think this Lent about where are we enjoying the glory of the Mass? I mean, if you think about it, Peter was on the mountaintop. He was with Jesus. That's literally the Eucharist, right? And he's trying to glorify that moment, but he's avoiding doing the work. So this Lent, where are we glorifying God, but we are not doing the work? And that's something that we have to reflect on because, I was a liturgy geek for so long. I still love that traditional Mass, but I was resting in the comfort and assurances that I felt that I had because it was an ancient rite. Like just because it was old, it was the best rite. That's what I thought.
Dan Tilson, are you telling me
Oh
that
boy.
because the Latin Mass is old, that it gave you comfort? Almost like the Latin traditional Mass was a mask you were wearing? Kind of like, I don't know, taking a phrase from the 20th century meaning other Christ, throwing it into the Latin translation and calling it alter Christus makes it official because it's Latin, because it sounds old and sounds like it has history behind it. Is that what you're saying?
It was complicated, man, because I genuinely, okay, in the respect that you're talking about, my mask is off
Now,
but all of us, we still have a mask on to some
very
degree.
true.
So
Very true.
it's complicated. I love the traditional Latin Mass. I do not love the reasons that I used to be so in favor of it. And part of it was we were just taught that, I felt like a deficient Catholic. And if I could just defend the church and truth in a better way, then I could make it. And I wanted to make it. I think I wanted to have that approval of the priests and the parishioners around me, but the motives were good but complicated. And since you mentioned the Latin Mass here, you know, the Tridentine Rite, which is what in the United States we call traditional Latin Mass, it comes from after the Protestant Reformation. Yes, there's almost always been a Mass in Latin. That's not what I'm talking about. But the one that people are calling the traditional Latin Mass, that comes from after the Protestant Reformation. And there was a big swing at trying to make sure people saw enough difference and contrast. They're like, oh, I should stay Catholic because those Protestants, even if they have good ideas over here or I like their ideas, it's just too different. And so that was a big part of it. But do you know what else has happened since the Protestant Reformation?
Well, a lot of things have changed, right? Since that era of the church, right? We have, the fall of royalty, right? We don't have as many
true.
kings and queens anymore in the world that govern massive lands. They're more figureheads now in a lot of countries. We have changing of governments. I mean, we have the rise of democracy as one of them, with the Industrial Revolution and everything else too. Like, there's so many changes that came after the Protestant Reformation that really reshaped the world we lived in.
Yeah, that's exactly. So the altar Christus, as far as I can tell, the first time it has ever been used in the way that it was used on the Arlington Diocese Vocation webpage was actually it was an American invention after our Civil War. So you find these periods in the church where we refine our theological ideas after periods of turmoil. But you touched exactly on where it entered the mainstream of the Catholic Church was by 1908, enough people were able to vote that the church was like, this is big, guys. People,
guys, this is big.
People, if you don't know, he's making fun of my wedding planner in Italy from last year. That's what he's doing. But no, the church was like, ooh, we've never had to deal with this before. People can vote. And I think by 1908, people were getting the sense that one day, even women can vote.
Gasp, right?
Yeah. No, so the church, I think, just like the Tridentine Rite, which we call the traditional Latin Mass, was a way to heighten that contrast so people could understand that Protestants and Catholics are different. The same thing with Alter Christus shifting from, something that all of the baptized take part in to now this is like a catchy phrase that we throw around on our men's vocations page. That was to drive the contrast, right? Because it is hard to make the case that your everyday average Joe is up there transforming bread into Christ. And so there has to be some form of separation. I think you touched on that, where even when people were trying to encounter you when you were wearing your habit or your postulate uniform, like there was something different about you. There was an aura about you because one day maybe you'll stand on that altar and transform bread into Jesus. And so you must be different.
But correct me if I'm wrong here. There's nothing that says the clothing you have to wear as a priest when you celebrate Mass, though, right? Because you could technically do it in sweats. Like if you're in a war zone, can you imagine the military chaplain who's a priest coming out in full vestments in the middle of the battlefield to hold Mass for the soldiers? I don't think that's a thing.
So the rubrics are definitely written for normal standards, which are not like battlefield conditions.
Valid.
Okay. I don't know the answer to that. I think you're right that there are cases where priests have been in prison and they're celebrating Mass from prison in whatever their inmate jumpsuit is. Okay. I do believe that most of the military archdioceses do have some sort of fatigue that still fits that uniform, that cloth.
Man, those Lenten camo purples.
Yeah.
So good.
But I mean, to your point, a priest who's in jail because it's a communist country in, the Soviet times and he's hiding in a jail cell and he has a little piece of bread and is going to consecrate it and say Mass. Yeah, it's still valid. It's still valid. We wouldn't consider that normal, but it is valid. So, yeah, that is a challenging point, right? Like, because we put so much emphasis on what the priest wears. Well, here in the United States, priests wear black, right? When you're walking around Rome, unless you're at a formal setting and you see a priest wearing black, you're like, which state are you from? Because priests and bishops tend to wear, they still got the collar with that tab that you can insert, but the more common colors are white, blue, light gray. Black is seen as like, it's very stiff. It is a requirement in the United States. I don't believe it's a requirement anywhere else in the world, unless you're at a formal event with the Pope. And in that case, you're not wearing the suit, you're wearing the full cassock.
Yeah.
So anyway, the point being, sometimes the church changes the way we articulate things because we're trying to drive contrast. But in a sense, I don't know, this is uncomfortable. That's kind of a mask too.
Yeah.
Pope Leo keeps talking about how we need to have a defenseless truth. This is something he said a lot over the past few months at different speeches he's given. And it's something I'm reflecting on too, because even in my words, even though I'm trying to point out to people that they're using like alter Christus in a way that's modern. Can you imagine if I told someone around here that you're not traditional, you're modern, you're just putting it in Latin?
I think there'd be a whole group of people that would stroke out if they heard that.
I mean, even though I'm trying to encourage someone to take the mask off, if you think about it, in me doing that, I'm putting a mask on.
Yeah.
I know more than you. I'm a better, or I've at least proven my place in the Catholic Church. And so Pope Leo challenges me. How do I put down the mask? Or as the theologian we've talked about a lot, Tomáš Halík, that priest from the Czech Republic who survived communism, what is it about the mask of religion that is not the Catholic faith as I understand it? So, John, since our last episode, we've had a lot of people write in on TikTok and Instagram sharing their stories. And you believe it or not, that video that you were chuckling about with me taking the mask off and
I'm just saying, for someone who wasn't a theater major, it was very dramatic.
It was dramatic. But so many people wrote in. And by the way, I do love it when you guys encourage me not to succumb to the hate, because it makes me wonder if I'm unpopular. No, but the point is,
it's either that or the GIF images that the GIF comments that you get on TikTok and everything.
They're wild.
We even get some of them on Instagram too.
Yeah, we do.
It's out there.
But the point being, if you feel like you have to put on a performance to belong in the Catholic Church, know that that is not what God desires of you. And so John and I here with Theology for the Unwanted, we want to give you the tools to work through whatever it is that you're going through, because remember, holiness is about becoming everything that God made you for, specifically you, not the person next to you. And so we're doing our part to help the church make that an easier reality. And we also want to create an avenue where you guys can reach out and share your stories. Your stories are so important to the church and its development of theology in a way that is faithful to Catholic tradition, but also understands what you're going through, like when John shared his story about people going up to him and wishing him well at retreats and not realizing how insensitive that was. This will help us work on developing theology in a way that helps us encounter one another in deep and meaningful ways. You matter, and John and I love listening to your stories. So you can reach out at TheoUnwanted on Instagram and TikTok, or go to the website theologyfortheunwanted.com. Talk to you soon.